Okay then, so I've done a little bit really just show you how it's going to happen. What we're trying to achieve is this. Okay, so we've just done this and that was a real quick job, 10 minutes to get this type of effect. Okay, now what you're going to basically need is some water. It's got a tiny bit of washing up liquid in there, or dishwater soap in there. Literally all that does is help break the surface tension when you put it on. We've obviously already done the actual the silver work already where it's going to be. Now also I've got one of these milling ones with salt. Now the great thing with these, you'll get different size bits of rock salt come out of it. So you get some quite chunky. If I show you here, we've got them on here, and obviously white on white isn't a good idea, but you get the idea. So what we do, we just put this on, so we're getting very fine grits as well as quite lumpy grits coming through. And then obviously this will help because it will give us different types of texture in there. And I know you can't see those particularly well. Okay, so what we do, we're just going to pre-wet where we want this chipping to go. Now I've already got it on the leading edges a little bit, but certainly we've got a lot where this screw access go. Okay, and around this entire back side, just like that. So we just take a pinch of the rock salt, okay, and we pop it in and around those areas. And what happens is, where it's wet, it will stick. Okay, and then what you can do, once you've got a bit on there, you can actually just take a little bit of water and just tap the top and it'll help it soak in. And for this area here, we want a little bit more to really cover up this area perhaps. So we can just tap it on, wet it. Might be a little bit easier to have it this way for you. And it will do it just like this. So what we'll do is we'll just take a bit more running around this join, okay, pinch some on, just like so. Okay, just bring the camera in a little bit, taking a little bit of the water, and then you just touch it on, and you'll see it will turn darker. Once it's a little bit darker, you take another pinch, just place it over the top, just like so. So we're just going to take a little bit round this area up here. Now underside, to be honest, I went a little bit over the top, so what we're going to have to do is take a bit of that off. Okay, so what we're doing at the moment, we're just putting rock salt on the joints where the wings actually meet up. Okay, so we're just going to do a little bit around this area here. So we just take the rock salt, a little bit on that leading edge of the wing. Okay, a little bit more back down there, all around just like that. So we'll just do a little bit perhaps, little specks and things just in this area. We'll just let it soak in, a bit more of the powdery stuff. Okay, so we just take things like this, so we're just going to do it around the back here. This aileron's going to get a bit just down here. Okay, now we don't want this to be overly weathered like we did the underside, because let's say went a little bit over the top on the underside. So this we've got to be a little bit more held back, shall we say. Quite a bit around this gum bay. So picking up more of the rock type salt rather than the dusty stuff. Okay, we can just feed all this round. Okay, so perhaps we'll have a bit down this wing root. Just all on. And say these areas over this wing. And then what will happen is, as we'll show you in a second, we're just going to go all over it now. All dusty bits. Wingtips just a little bit more. Okay, just a fraction more in this area up here, these walkways. And I say we'll make a bit of a puddle effect right there. So we just put quite a bit, touch of water, a bit more of the powdered over the top, just to help it sink in. And there we go. That's really what we're going to do. We just need a little bit on these trailing edges. So pop some of these on. Quite a bit on the tops. The rest of it can all be quite loose. Okay. We'll do quite a bit over the step. So we just pinch a large amount on that rear step just in here, touch of water over the top just to soak in. And there we go. So what we'll do now, we'll just pick out, we'll break it out a little bit. We're going to pick out some little areas just up here, and I'll show you this wing then. So we're just going to pick out some areas, perhaps where it's going to have chipping. So as I say, we're not going totally over the top on this one, so we're just picking out a few pinches. Okay, and just run it down. Because some of this, what will happen is, some bits will become big chips, other bits will become just lightly weathered areas. So what we're going to do, we're going to pick out a couple of areas, perhaps here. So we make that bit extra wet, and we're going to place a little area of salt. Just down on these, because what's going to happen is a lot of this is going to blow away. Okay. Now what also you can do, if you wanted to go for a very heavy effect, you can actually spray, just mist some water on everywhere over this, and it will seal a lot of this on, okay? And it will stick to it and give you quite a weathered appearance. But with this, what we're trying to achieve is a more of a just a wet, chippy effect. Probably not as much as on the underside. To be honest, the underside I got a little carried away. Okay, and I went a little over the top with it, and probably put in a little bit too much. Okay, so we'll try and rectify a bit of that in a moment. So we're just running salt here. Okay, so what you can do, you can let that dry naturally, which is probably the best area, or you can just pop across it with a hairdryer, as we'll do in a moment. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to carry on and do the other wing. Okay, and then we'll spray up this in top half, and I can show you about it coming off and a few little other techniques you can do with it. So okay, what you do now is just give this a blast with a hairdryer to dry it all down. And then also what it will do, it will flick off if you've got any too much on there really. Okay, so we just move this out of the way. At this point, you know, you've got two things. You can either take a little bit off. If you think you've got a bit too much on there, you can just use a dry brush. It says when you're dry, when I think, well, I've got a little bit too much in here, I want to flick a little bit off. Okay, and you can just take off bits and pieces as you want. So we think, well, maybe a little bit too much going on up here. Okay, we'll blow some off. Or say you can get in with a airbrush and take a little bit off. Just turn up your pressure a little bit higher like this, okay, and we're trying to knock off a few bits and pieces where we got a little bit too much. Okay, when you're happy, all we're going to do, apart from spill paint everywhere, let's move the camera over a bit. Okay. When we're happy with it, we'll just clean up the end of this. Excuse me a moment. You can start your spraying. So we're just coming in with our blue. Now this is our sea blue. We're just lightly spraying this on. Okay, so we're just starting these leading edge wings around the front end of this cowl. Okay, and right the way over. Okay, then all we're going to do, quite a high amount of paint coming through, so we're pulling the trigger back quite a lot. We're just going to blow in this entire area. Okay, quite wet. Right the way over. Okay, I'll come over the top of this cowl. So being a little bit careful so I'm not masked up the canopy inside. Down the other wing. Flats, make sure you're getting in from all the different directions. Now you will lose some as you're spraying on, but don't worry about it. Just go right the way over. Just make sure you're all in. Okay, then what I do, normally come along, lighten this with a little bit of grey and then go over the top again. Okay, so what we'll do that now. And all this does is give a sort of mottly type of effect to your paintwork. So we'll put a little bit of grey in there. Okay, mix in. I say it's quite a thick mix. This isn't wet. This is probably only a third thinners in here. Okay, and then same thing, all we're going to do is just mottle, let the lighter colour come through, and we're just mottling effects all over just to break up the colours a little bit, and obviously with the chipping it'll, and then just lightly over everywhere. Because all we're trying to do is break it up a little bit. So if you can see your panels, you just want to go in centres of panels and things, leading edges where they're blended. Okay, now you just have to leave it. Literally, your best bet is to go away and leave this for an hour to totally dry off completely. Okay, as soon as you're totally dried off, then you can come back, I say, and start pulling it off like we did on the other side and everything else like that. So okay, moment of truth. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so what we're going to do is just rub gently off. As we say, it's this sort of stabby motions. As we go around. And then if you're thinking like, oh my god, what have I done? It's too much. Don't forget, you can always just overspray all of this. And there's a few little techniques we'll do in a moment where obviously it will be for showing. Let's ping these off. It will be for showing damage repair. So obviously we can respray some of these panels, and to be honest, this is why this area in the middle has been left. Okay, and we can do it. So there we go. That's so it's still very rough at the moment, but you get the gist of what we're getting here. Well, as I say, this is real extreme. Normally I wouldn't expect anyone to do what we've done here, but there we go. There's one wing showing through. Okay, and then obviously this will be a good example of a large splat of it here. So obviously we're in like this, and then obviously if we pull this off, you can see it's a great way to do these big old chips that we were talking about. The only drawback, to be honest, with all of this, it is incredibly messy. You do make a bit of a mess doing all of this. Okay, so we'll get it on the nose. So some of this is primer, some of this is silver. We've got different colours of silver on here as well. There we go. That's how you make one completely torn out, weathered to hell aircraft. So let's continue to brush this all off. So now at this point you're thinking, oh my God, you've killed that poor aircraft. It looks horrendous now and gone over the top. Don't forget, now we can go back and respray and touch in areas. So we can go along and say, right, okay, the stars and bar area, we're going to have to do some work around this to put it all right. But it just gives you an idea of exactly how, you know, you could take this to the extreme of going through. Obviously, to put this back to right, we can wash this down and start fresh with it as well. Being acrylic paint under warm water, you can actually wipe a lot of this off. But it just shows you how, if you wanted to, and go to quite an extreme, you can do something like this. Okay, so because it is far too strong, what we're doing is a quick rub over, and we're going to reset and redo it. Because really, you know, although it looks fantastic for the type of effect we're trying to achieve with this one, we want it just to be lightly or moderately weathered. You know, if we were going to do something like really heavy weathering or something like that, then that would be perfect. But what we need to do is to get all this off. So what we're doing really is just gone around and just sanding down everywhere. Now this is a good example of not to panic. So a lot of people might think, oh God, I've just ruined my model and what we're going to do now and everything else. What we need to do is to make sure this paintwork is just sanded smooth. Don't worry too much about leaving lumps and bumps, because it's going to actually help with the weathering, which is something we'll do in a moment. But what we need to do is it just to be all smooth, okay? Now if you're really finicky, you can obviously go around and you can rescribe everywhere, some of the panel lines and all the rest of it. But what we need here, we just need it to be a nice clean surface again. So we're just popping around the entire model with a bit of a rub down with a medium sanding sponge. And we're making sure we've got all the areas nice and smooth. So when you run your fingers over it, it should be smooth. So if you've got anywhere like down here, we've got quite a bit of salt still sticking onto a few of these areas. So we can just rub these down all nice and smooth. Same around this tail area as well. That's the area. And all we're going to do is reset, respray, and do it again. So we just pop all around these areas here, making sure we're all nice and smooth. And say, have a feel. If you can feel it smooth, you know. So we're just going to pop around like this, and then we're going to go around with a lighter sanding sponge. Okay, so it's all sprayed silver. So all we're doing now is literally, we've got some Tamiya XF4, which is this primer type colour, and we're just going round spraying in over the top of the silver in the middle of the panels. We're not doing around the actual joints themselves, so obviously we're going to chip them. Okay, so we're just do the leading edges of the wings, as they're quite important. Okay, and that's how we've got it. So it's very, very rough job. Okay, we're going to let it dry off totally, have a bit of a clear up here with all this chipping stuff, and we're going to go back and do the chipping again, then the blue over the top, and then that way hopefully we can make it a little bit more subtle than what it was last time. Okay, it's been dry now for around about an hour, quite warm in here, so we can probably push on. So we've done a little bit down the back end, you can probably see down here. So same thing again, dry brush, pretty much no one, and very light tapping movements as you go around. Okay, we don't want to be ripping the hell out of it. What we're trying to do is obviously get all the paintwork and everything to chip through. So this is version number 2, which is obviously a lot less chip than we had before. Okay, so obviously hopefully we're quite chippy up here. It's still a little bit wet, could do with a little bit more time. You can tell that because it sort of clumps up as you go. But really, there we go. So if we bring you in a little bit closer, you can see there's that wing done. So if we do up here on this fuselage side here, I'll brush these off. That's the top. So we've got a lot less, although it's quite heavily distressed, I think when it's had like a wash over this and the other things that we're going to do to it, it should give us a far more reserved weathering effect to what we had last time. Now obviously the texture of the paint here is very rough, so what you could do is go and literally run this under the tap. Okay, but that's giving us this type of effect. Now obviously we can add to this if we wanted to and give it even more sort of chipping and things like that. Now the way you do that is wet the actual area itself and then stab it with a brush, and you'll see it will peel off just like we've done around here. So we're just carrying on going over these areas, and as I say, we can probably do with a little bit more sort of silver chipping down in here perhaps, which we can do by hand afterwards. It's not so much of a problem. So we're just going to lightly brush everywhere, and obviously it's in there. Now we've done the underside, as you can see down in here. There's a lot less than what we had the first time. Okay, and obviously we've done the sides and we've gone in the areas, so it's given us a nice weathered in look. Now the big thing that we're going to have to take care of is obviously when we come along to doing the, scrape these off, is that when we come along to do the actual, just take those down, there we go, when we come along to do the actual markings and insignia, there's a couple of little options you can do with this. Okay, you can either cut them up before you put them on to make it look like they're sort of had a bit of a hard life and a bit of a kick in and everything else like that. Or the other way of doing it, of course, what happens is that you can actually put them on and then chip them up. And by chipping them up, we're going to go in reverse. So we'll put, you know, literally cover the decal in stone chipping like we've done like this, and then spray over it. And then that way you get the same effect, because obviously the silver will show through, but the decal will show through instead. And that's one way of literally doing it, which is always a little bit of an odd one to do. So there we go, we just brush this down. So okay, a couple of things. First thing you'll notice, it's got some real rough, hard edges to this. Some of this is where the chipping is, and obviously some of it is where the salt is. But I think you agree that's a lot better to what we had last time. And if you want sort of extreme weathering to sort of, you know, bring them up, then this is the type of effect you go for. It's very, very simple doing stone chipping and everything else like that. But it's one of those things, a lot of people will look at this and go, oh my God, he's killed it, what a horrible thing, and everything else. Other people will go, I absolutely love it. And it is really, really personal. What you want to do is do it personal to you. The bit where you think, I think I've overdone it, just stop there. Don't do any more to it. And then, you know, obviously you can go back like we did the first time, a little bit too much and we overdid it. So we went back, and obviously I thought, well, look, the primer colour isn't really showing through there. So we're going to go back and do the primer colours and things. So to say, there is various things we can do on this to continue distressing it. One of them is to give it a sand, which is a little bit tricky here. So I just grab my sanding sponge. Okay, now this one here is obviously what we call the miracle polishing for doing glass work and everything else. But there again, don't push too heavy down on this, otherwise what's going to happen is you're very, very quickly going to go through everything you've done. So very lightly, just give it a bit of a rub over. Okay, the areas where it's a little bit rough. And what it will do, it'll just take the top shininess of the paintwork off. Then if you wet your finger over it, you'll get a better idea of the effect you're getting. But there again, it will just dull it down just a little bit. But say this is going to have a coat of future and all those things afterwards. And obviously there's a lot of salt on here, so you're probably going to get these marks as well. So you see all this down here? This is salt water, okay? So there again, if you wet your finger, then you taste it, it will taste of salt. Okay, so you can literally just go along these areas and give them a rub over with a damp sponge, something. So I've got a normal sponge here that's dry. Just give it a rub over, and it will help just lift up any bits. You can probably hear them on the sponge that are doing it, but it gives you a very nice effect around all the areas. So I'm just going to pop around everywhere and give this a bit of a rub down and get all these last little bits off, salt off, things like that. We'll have a check around it, and then at this point you can say, right, okay, I'm quite happy with how this all is, or perhaps, you know, there's a few little things I'm going to change. Perhaps like this bit down here is a little bit too much, and this here, you could respray them in. Pick a panel out and just respray it. Give you a good weathering effect. So there we go. That is my version of chipping. Okay, now sometimes, you know, you do some painting and everything else, and perhaps you're not happy with it, perhaps it's gotten wrong, or perhaps you just want to give your model a complete, you know, new relife, okay? Perhaps you want to respray it. Now, obviously, you could just sand down and go right over the top of it, but with this particular one, I've done a lot of salt weathering and stuff like that, so the thing is, the chipping has actually got a texture, which is great as an effect, because obviously, as in real life, it's actually chipped into the paintwork. Unfortunately, it's a nightmare to spray over it, because as soon as you spray over it, obviously those textures will show through, unless you're going to then do re-chipping over the top, it will cause all types of problems. Now, I know a lot of people say about, you know, obviously how do you strip back paint and everything else, and how do you go about it. So I thought I'd do this one really on how I do it. Now, I actually use this stuff. Now, this is IPA, okay. Now, this particular one is, just seeing what percentage alcohol this one is. Actually, it doesn't say. But I think this one is a very high alcohol content on this particular one. But I bought a big one like this for £5 in the UK many years ago, and as you can see, I've still got gallons of it to get through. So I keep that locked away in a filing cabinet. Health and safety, but I've got a little pot of it just here. Now, the thing is with IPA, it won't attack your plastic. If you was to come along with cellulose thinners and things like that, it will attack your plastic and it will melt physically the plastic, and all the rivet lines and detailing and everything else you've got, you will lose instantly because it will just blend them in, okay? So this way, what we can actually do with the IPA, because it's non-aggressive to the plastic, but it is to acrylic paint. Now, this is also acrylic paint that I'm doing this with. This isn't enamels, because obviously enamels will be different things. You can use things like oven cleaners and things for them, but all we do, we brush it on absolutely everywhere for the moment, okay, and we're just going to start to let it eat, and immediately it will start to melt through, and you might be able to see if we bring the camera in a bit closer here, you might be able to see that it's actually, where I did multi-layered painting and chipping, you'll see the top coat start to go immediately, which is obviously the blue in this case. Okay, a bit more on there. Showing through the underside, which was green, and then under that it's silver. So if you were doing this as an effect, just as a perhaps, you can actually use this as a weathering to actually bring it back even more, which is a little technique I do. So I cover it with IPA and take off coats of paint, and if you've done multi-level painting, you get this type of effect, which was something I was trying to do, which quite frankly I overdid it a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is go around. Now the thing is, don't touch the paintwork, because if you do, you will stick your fingers in, because the paint goes extremely soft, okay? So all we do, we give it a good old rub round to start with, and what this basically does is soften up the paintwork and gets it ready for the next step. Now there's two ways of doing it. Either you can just carry on with IPA, rinsing it all off, okay, until you get down, because obviously this has got primer, pre-shade, silver, this yellowy orange colour, for which was supposed to be the aircraft primer, and then obviously you're down then to the blue on top, okay? So as you start to get through them all, you sort of start, but already I can feel it. You can hear like a cracking sound, and what that actually is because I'm down to plastic. So we just give that a rinse off. As soon as you get into the plastic, it comes off a lot easier because it peels off. Now what you can do, if you're very careful, take this over to the sink. And obviously I can't get the camera in there to show you this, but it's what I do. At this point, when I'm down to here and we've got plastic in, take it over to the sink. I'm running a pretty warm tap. We're not talking boiling hot because we don't want to melt the plastic, but we are talking probably, you know, enough to scald you if you kept your hand under it too long. Put it under it, rinse it down, I rub it all off like this, and you're left with plastic. The only thing is, it does make a huge mess of your sink, so your partner might not be best happy with it, but it's an easier way to get it off than doing it this way. This way, it does work, it just takes a little bit longer, but as you can see, We are down in here and you're thinking, oh, it's looking a right mess, but trust me guys, it will rinse through and be all okay. So we just come along a little bit more. And as I say, what I'll do in a moment, I'm just going to rinse this under the tap to rinse it off. Now as you rinse it off, give it a little bit more IPA over the top. Okay, and that'll help get it all off. But you'll notice the stuff where you've got over here and you're letting it soak in, sort of eats through and it peels off almost. You can actually rub it off with your fingers as well, which is quite a nice little touch. But I'm just going to fill up these gum bays. So literally we'll come across here, just down the back of these flaps and ailerons and let it start eating its way in. Okay, we just flip it over. And we're just going to do the same with the other side, because what will happen is all this can get going and start eating its way through and softening up. Now as soon as you put water onto it, obviously it starts to go hard again. So it's a bit of a balancing act of actually washing off and everything else. Okay, so we just ice, and as you can probably see just down here, it's actually peeling off. You can peel this off if you were quite clever and took your time with it. But it doesn't take much to get all this off, and as I say, you can use it as a type of weathering effect as well, which is something we'd cover in other shows. But this is really just to show you how I strip back my models. Okay, so if we just come back, what we do, there we go, it's really starting to get out now. We're almost all off this entire area, and you say this one here has actually got a total of 4 coats of paint on it. It's got a primer, it's got a silver, it's got a orange coat, okay, and it's got the blue on top, and then after all of that I had a coat of clear as well. So it will eat through absolutely everything. If you're thinking, will it go through clear? Oh yeah. So what I'm going to do now is you literally just run this under the tap, give it a wipe off, and I'll bring it back and show you where we've got. Okay, so round 1, we've got it to this stage. Okay, so what we do is clean off the brush. So it's all pretty much water on here. So we just wipe some of this water off. Okay, back in with the old thinners, and you should notice second time round it comes off very easy because you've got rid of all the aggressive parts which are going to hold on to your paintwork, for want of a better word. And you should find it comes off. And say same thing, you can pop along with a tap. I won't, but I would normally go along off to the tap, run it under the tap, rinse it down. It's a lot cleaner, faster than doing it the way I'm really showing you here, but this way you get an idea of how I do it. Okay, plenty over. And then when you're doing wipe downs, say it's just normal kitchen roll, make sure you've got a nice wet cloth. It's covered in IPA because it will help it come off. Just like so. And then what you can do, just do your circular motions as you would, just to clean up. And the great thing is, it shouldn't, I'll say shouldn't because I don't want anybody emailing me saying it ruined mine, but it shouldn't affect your plastics or anything like that. But there we go, that's easy paint stripping. Okay, so with the final wipe over, we are all done. And there we go, all sorted. So what we can do now, we can get on really and reprime this one up and start all over again. A couple of things I have done. I have removed off the canopy, and that's the beauty about using PVA glue. Little knife, cut it in there, got it out because I wasn't too sure how clean it was on the inside, and I didn't want it to be in the position where we get to this point and we find out that actually the glasswork is still a little bit wrong. So that was the idea behind that, which is also quite good because the HUD glass moved at some point, so I can reset that and fix that. So what we're going to do now is leave that off to one side to totally dry off, clear all this rubbish away, and we can get some primer back on it.